Kia ora koutou, welcome back to the Happy Revolution podcast. It has been such a long time since we've released episodes because we have been really busy finishing our study for the year, but we are tentatively back with an episode that we recorded over a year ago that we've finally gotten around to editing and releasing. This is a conversation that Rachel and I had with our religious studies tutor, Cam Graham. At the time of recording, which again was over a year ago, Cam was just finishing his Masters in Religious Studies, focusing on Christian leadership in the public sphere. This interview was pretty casual, but a really lovely conversation. Rachel and I met and became friends in Cam's class, and therefore started this podcast. So we're big fans of him, and we hope you enjoy this conversation as much as we did.
Okay, cool. Well, we should get started then. Thank you so much for joining us. It's so nice to have you here. Do you want to ask the first question?
Sure. So we wanted to know, why did you choose to do your Masters on Christian leadership in Aotearoa?
Sure. Christian leadership, it was actually, I kind of stumbled into it. I was meant to be going overseas, that was my plan, and I needed a plan B when COVID hit. So I spent a long time brainstorming ideas because I'd always wanted to do a Masters. And in my honours degree, I had more kind of an abstract philosophical way of studying religion. But through various brainstorming sessions, me and Jeff, the head of the department, decided that that's kind of not the angle I should go down. And actually my partner raised the idea of studying Christian leadership, knowing that I have an interest in that subject and knowing that I know some really impressive Christian leaders that I could talk to. And so that just clicked into place immediately when she said it, and then that was the plan. I just started developing it from there. That was probably start of 2020, so 2.5 years ago now, when I came up with that idea.
COVID years as well, that's rough.
Yeah, it was strange because your mind's overseas doing something exciting and on an adventure, so I had to kind of dial that element of it on myself down and kind of adjust to the academic way of being, which is in conflict with some of those things. Yeah.
Are you still planning to go overseas at any point? Or?
Yeah. I can't think of anything other than my thesis right now, as in I shouldn't and I can't physically do it. But I imagine as soon as I'm done in 3 weeks' time that I'll have a new energy for plans and that sort of thing.
What were you going to do overseas?
We were just going to move. We're about 3 weeks away from leaving to move to Edinburgh.
Whoa.
In Edinburgh for no particular reason other than it looks pretty and I have ancestors from there, so that's the only reason, but yeah.
Can you go into a bit more detail about what you looked at in your Masters and who you spoke to and what you discovered?
Sure. So the original intention was to focus on a church in Gore, where my dad used to be the pastor about 20 years ago. Which is a weird thing to think that I'm that old, that I can remember that. But so it was to interview a few business leaders from this church and also a couple of school principals that I knew went there. And it's a relatively small country church, so I knew there were farmers and things like that, people that ran small businesses that attended this church. So my goal was to go there and kind of gain an understanding of the southern community and their religion and leadership. And then someone suggested to me that I interview Bill English. He's from a very close nearby town. And I kind of just, at the start, I sent him an email just out of interest. I just wanted to, for personal sake, it wasn't even for my thesis at that point. And he said yes. And so I went and interviewed him. And then things started to take off a little bit. So I ended up expanding beyond that town, beyond the whole South Island, the mainland, to all around New Zealand. So I ended up interviewing leaders from 3 different contexts. So state schools. So I interviewed probably close to 15 state school principals. I did a case study on a business leader in Southland who was amazing Christian man down there. And also, I'm trying to think of the number, 8 politicians, some who are currently sitting and some who have retired, like Bill, all of whom are Christian of various denominations and all of whom have very strong opinions about the state of the world and their faith and the way they lead. So my intent was to understand how they navigate their interactions with the secular. Wow, that sounded really academic to me. So that was the goal, trying to understand the methods they use to engage with their secular communities. So at a political level, these are large communities. It's the national community. At a state school, you're dealing with a secular hierarchy that you're involved in as a principal. but also the community of parents who are very sensitive about their children because they're very vulnerable. And then in business, there's a lot more freedom to do and say what you wish when you're the owner of a business, but there's still limitations to being able to discuss religion or being able to express your faith. So I was I am still doing it. I'm kind of investigating the ways that they navigate those tensions. I love the research gathering process. I love the interview stage and finding interviewees and talking with them. Since that ended, it's been a little bit of a struggle for me to switch on the academic side of my skill set, I guess, because I had a longish break, I guess. But no, it's been quite enlightening, actually. It's been fun.
Can I just ask why you decided to focus on Christians particularly?
Well, I'm a Christian. It gave me a kind of at the very, very beginning, there wasn't going to be a specific religion focus. It's just going to be religion and leadership. But I found that talking to leaders, I had common ground, and I could appeal to the sense of we're in this kind of this together, or you know what I'm talking about because you experience the same things I do. And so that, and it was also just a little bit more comfortable, I think. They felt very comfortable with me, and I felt very comfortable talking to them. Not that I wouldn't with other people from people with other religions, but I feel like I'd lack the sensitivity to be able to do them justice more than anything.
What do you think some of the main takeaways, or was there any, did you have many people who expressed the same struggles or the same kind of, reflections on what it's like to be a Christian doing leadership?
Yeah, I did. Quite alarmingly similar. I originally thought principals and politicians would be very different people from very different backgrounds, different geographical locations, all sorts of differences. But what I found in talking to them was they're kind of singing off the same song sheet a little bit. They feel isolated within their communities, as though they're kind of gawked at or looked at and not taken seriously because of their faith. They feel a very strong need to only express their faith in ways that are suitable to their communities. And that doesn't mean that they can't evangelize. It means they can't discuss matters of belief, say, because belief is looked at by a lot of their people as something irrational or kind of indicative of their difference. And so with principals, I felt very strongly, because they're in this, they're kind of dealing with the cold side of a secular state that is kind of indifferent to the way you feel. It just has rules and you follow them. But also there's really emotive parents who have demands on you and you have to engage with them. And they started to share stories of interactions they've had with their communities where their religion is the centre of tension, or their faith. So those were quite alarming, actually, because a southern community where a lot of these people were from, I thought maybe they'd have a little bit of more room to manoeuvre, but no, they're very limited. Politicians as well, they just feel like victims, to be honest. So I talked to some of the ones I talked to: Simon Bridges, Bill English, like I said, Chris Pink, who's a younger national politician, one Labour Party member who I don't use in my thesis, but he had quite a different view, Don Brash, which was very strange, who calls himself a fallen Christian, but he was a believer until the age of 56, he told me.
Interesting.
And then so he's fallen away from his belief, but he still considers himself as kind of raised in that milieu, I guess.
I don't know who any of these people are. I'm not...
Rayne's very Australian.
I'm sorry.
Bill English was the Prime Minister about a year in 2017.
A year?
After John Key.
Yeah, because John Key retired a year before the election, so he retired in end of 2016, I think. And Bill English took over, and he ran against Jacinda, when Jacinda won that election. Well, she technically got less support than Bill, but they made a deal with another party and got in. And then Bill retired from politics after that. But he was also the Deputy Prime Minister for 9 years. So
in national. On national.
In national, yeah. So under John Key, who was the Prime Minister from 2009 to 2016.
Look at that. Look at you with the dates.
Yeah, wow. Numbers at this stage of my thesis are very difficult. Don Brash was the leader of he was the leader of the Reserve Bank for ages, like 15 years. And then he joined National, and then within a year he was leader of the party. And then he ran for an election, lost. Very controversial election, I forgot what year it was, earlier in the 2000s. And then he left public life, and then he came back as ACT party leader in 2011, relatively failed campaign. ACT had never been super popular, but they were less popular under him. And then he retired from public life. He's much older than the other politicians I talked to. He's 86? No, it must be younger than that. 82 maybe? So he's from a different... So it's interesting to hear his view on the tensions of being in a secular environment, him being a fallen Christian, like he says, and being so much older. And then I also talked to Simon O'Connor, who is probably the most conservative politician in Parliament, within National at least. Interesting guy, intense man, but also one of the most welcoming I talked to. People like Simon Bridges kind of wanted to shoo me away, but Simon O'Connor gave me a lot of time, actually, nearly an hour and a half in his office in Parliament, so that was cool. Who else did I talk to? Chris Pink, who's a younger National Party politician from Auckland. I forget what district, unfortunately. Ex-Navy, ex-lawyer, really nice, good guy to talk to, really thoughtful. So yeah, that was just beyond my thesis. It was just quite a cool experience to engage with these people and figure out what's ailing them. And a lot of them at that level feel quite hard done by.
What do you mean by that?
So the senior leaders amongst them feel like their religion is kind of treated as a bit of a, how do I put it, a bit of an oddity or strange, especially in the media. The media don't really know how to question them about it or raise it with adequate sensitivity so that they feel like they can have a dialogue. They feel kind of illuminated as different. They feel like people are accusing them just from the way the questions are asked often. They also just feel like, oh, this is my belief, everyone has a belief, so why can't I express mine? So they come up with all sorts of ways to explain that away, but that's the heart of it, I thought.
I think it is a really interesting, hard thing with just religion in general. I think we kind of talked about this during our course a little bit, is this like idea that it's like a taboo, and it's not like the whole thing of like bringing the sacred or bringing religion into the secular world, and that's like not really, particularly in like Western societies and in New Zealand society, it's not really considered like an acceptable thing to do, to try and bring ideas of faith and the sacred or the transcendent into secular spaces. So I guess, do you think part of how these individuals felt?
Massively. They were very aware, especially the likes of Bill English, of this idea in New Zealand where religion is strictly private, and outside of yourself or your own space you shouldn't speak about it, or you shouldn't speak about it too much. There's this kind of ambiguous line of there's too much religion and that's offensive, and we all kind of block our ears. And I don't think that is necessarily just a secular feeling. I think many Christian Kiwis are uncomfortable with speaking about religion, hearing religion, and in spaces where it's kind of designated as secular. We have this tendency to kind of attempt to block off these areas of our lives, and I just don't think, in some ways, that is just incredibly difficult and hurtful for these leaders, because as a leader you're seen by your people to a greater extent than if you're an employee. Your job is to communicate, to strategize, and to engage with people. It's like relational at its very heart. So even if you don't speak your religion, people begin to form ideas about what your religion is or how you practice it. So even beyond their expression, leaders feel kind of like they have this kind of secular gaze upon them.
I even feel like that as just like a student and a person who has a faith, even in, I would say, religious studies course, there feels like you're like, am I allowed to talk about it like this? And I'll often bring up, I mean, my whole life is my faith, and I think particularly doing like Christian community stuff, like it's, you just stop separating all of the different parts of your life, and so it can be a real challenge, like trying to explain to my friends like why I live the way I do, and not intrude or pass that line, that invisible line that feels like you're not meant to talk about faith or religion. And I can feel people's discomfort.
Yeah, so can I. Even in tutoring, it took me a few courses to be comfortable saying that I was a Christian or discussing my own personal faith. I kind of came to the conclusion that that's actually not a helpful way to look at it, is to kind of feed into this whole separation narrative or belief. I found it more productive to kind of in like a kind of subtle way to challenge it a little bit and to try and be comfortable. So it took me a while. How many courses have I done? 6 or 7. But now I feel much more comfortable, and you do, even in religious studies course, you do see people reel back a bit, and even at the odd comment. So yeah, it's about training yourself to respond to that in different ways.
I actually thought that you embodied that really well in our course.
Okay.
Yeah, the way that you talked about kind of having a faith and stuff, I think it made it feel really safe to talk about in that space. Yeah.
The course that I'm doing at the moment with Holly as a tutor, who obviously is amazing and brilliant, but at the beginning she got everyone to go around and introduce themselves and then kind of state which religious tradition we're from, or if we're even from a religious tradition, or if we're secular.
Mm-hmm.
And there was maybe one other religious person in the room other than me, and I just felt like so awkward saying it. Which she obviously gave us the option not to speak at all and not to say anything. But when I say I am a Christian and I'm involved in this church, you just don't know what assumptions come up for people in the room in response to you, because they don't know you, they don't know anything about you, they've never had a conversation with you, and it's quite overwhelming, all the narratives that go through my head that I assume are going through everyone else's, which is not necessarily the truth, but it's terrifying. I can understand why people, sometimes it does feel easier just to separate it off into a private sphere and not have to engage with that kind of thing. You've mentioned it already briefly, but can you talk about how you try and how do you deal with this? Like, how do you bring your faith into public space, or do you at all? And
me personally, or the people I studied?
I'd be interested to know how you do
Both. Go do both.
Yeah, well, with me personally, I just avoid public spaces. So, no. If I look at it honestly, actually, with my friends, most of my friends don't have a faith of any kind, and they'd admit that, and they'd think that's a good thing, and that's on them. And I suppose when I'm around these people, who are my very good friends, you kind of do a little dance, and you pretend that you're not one of those too religious people, which I don't really know what that means, but there's kind of a line where they think, are you going to be religious to the extent where you disagree with me about political things? And if you are, then maybe you're fundamentalist, or maybe you have these, maybe you're outdated, or maybe you're behind the times, or whatever. So you do a little dance, and you don't talk about politics. You don't talk about sensitive things like belief with these people. That is, you kind of just feel your way through it. I suppose that's what I do. I don't have any strategies or anything like that, but it is food for thought, especially as I navigate my own faith journey. How these discussions that I'm having that are disconnected from that with my friends, am I somehow hollowing out my religious ideals through those conversations? Am I kind of chipping away at them a little bit? And I'm not sure. I guess my strategy overall is just not think about it. Whereas the people I interviewed, they have to think about it to a much stronger extent than I've experienced before, because they're public figures, or they have community members who, if they deem them as too religious, they get mad. So I found that they have strategies. Politicians, they're quite predictable. They just manage their brand. So if religion is a threat to their brand, which equals their support, maintenance of support, they kind of just bury the parts of their religion that could threaten their brand. Principles, they're interesting because they sought, instead to kind of give in, they sought to find ways around the limitations of their secular environment, so to be Christian within the limits. And one of them described it as being sneaky. So he's not, which is a really bad thing to say when you've got 200 children you're looking after. But he's not being evangelistic, that's not what he means. What he means is he's trying to be Christian without being seen to be Christian. So what I gathered from him saying that is he's trying to live out his values, and he's also trying to find areas of common ground with the secular community where they can agree. So in schools, for example, they teach values now. They didn't really do that when I was younger, but they do that now. To help foster good behaviour in the classroom. And a way for him to feel Christian in his environment is to find values that they agree on, so he can almost translate in some cases he literally translates scripture into non-religious terms, and that goes over his community's head, well, most of the time, and they think he's really wise and smart. So he ticks that box. In business, and I I have had a lot to do with this business leader beyond my study. So he's a friend of mine and my dad's, and we do work with him and that sort of thing. He just is unabashedly Christian in really quite spectacular ways. He just, like in a business meeting, I talk to most of the staff, so I know most of them aren't religious or even comfortable with religion. He just quotes scriptures, he prays, in ways that I've never seen before. And when I first saw it, I was very uncomfortable. I thought, people must feel uncomfortable with this, they must not like the way he's doing this, like, what is he doing? Like, and so I started to ask his staff, like, how do you respond to this? And most of them said they were uncomfortable at the start. Most of them, they felt like it was his prerogative, but they didn't want to listen or engage with him. So they kind of just let him do his own thing. You know, he owns this place, he pays my income, so let him speak the way he wants to speak. But actually, after I've been around them a long time, after a year or more, he started deploying these strategies where he relates to Christianity as if it was like a wisdom book, basically as if it was like Plato or something like that. He kind of disenchants it, but keeps this religious character and asks them questions. Like one time in a meeting I was in, he asked a group of 10 non-religious people what they think it means to be created in the image of God. And I was there like, wow. I was like, that I thought that was deeply uncomfortable, and so did they initially. But then they started to answer, like, what does that mean? Well, it means that no one creates anything for no reason. You don't build something just for no reason at all. At the very least, it's entertainment. At the most, it's practical. So one of the staff members said, you know, to be created in his image is to be created with a purpose. And this person hadn't been to church in their life. And then I started to notice that more. So he starts deploying this strategy all the time because he feels it working, where he asks them a question and they respond back as if it's like a small group. And he's kind of like the
facilitator.
Yeah. And they're answering and engaging. A few times there were tears. It got very emotional and very serious. But he started to make real progress. Progress, I mean, for people listening to this, that sounds bad, doesn't it? That he's making progress. What does that mean? Is he converting them? No. None of them have become Christians after him. He's finding progress in that he is finding a neutral ground where they can engage with one another without him having to, like, sacrifice his religious integrity. He is still Christian. He is explicitly so. But they know it and they feel it, and they're able to come to an agreement, and they're able to talk with one another. And it was actually really, it was impressive, and it was enlightening. Actually, it taught me a lot. One, that the secular is malleable. So these walls that my friends put up, perhaps those aren't as solid as I thought they were. Perhaps there is a method for breaking them down and showing them that, hey, I'm not some irrational man from some backwater. I've actually read this incredibly wise book and engage with it on an intellectual and heart level, and I'm not a fool. And perhaps me not being a fool and you not being a fool, perhaps we can have a conversation. Perhaps we can make progress. So that is my personal finding from it. Yet to find a way or the courage to do that properly. But I guess I'm thinking of ways at the moment, now that I come to the end of this period of study, where maybe I'm starting to see that maybe it's not an argument. Maybe you're not arguing against this secular monolith. You're not trying to convince them. Maybe it's as easy as pointing out something beautiful about the Bible or about the tradition. Look at this community doing good for people, not to get something back, but because they think this person has an inherent dignity. Pointing something like that out. Pointing out architecture, like the Sistine Chapel, or artwork, showing them Rembrandt, and just as a way of illuminating beauty in a way that they can recognise and perhaps come to their own conclusion that you, me, were not just these blinded, ignorant fools, I guess.
That was so good.
Yeah, that is really amazing. In the course that we're doing at the moment, we have to read Habermas, who is difficult to read and pretty painful. And he talks about how religious people, in entering into the democracy, have to translate themselves into secular language to be understood. But secular people obviously don't have to translate themselves. Which you use that word, you use the word translate.
Yeah.
Which is just, it's so interesting from what you're saying, there are ways to be able to bring our religious faith or tradition into the public sphere and still be taken seriously.
So Habermas thinks that his idea of deliberative democracy is that people engage with one another to form a consensus on what the common good is, and the, in air quotes, best argument wins in this public sphere because people engage on neutral terms. Religious people have a different outlook or a different, more enchanted way of understanding reality. So the way they speak or the way they engage with arguments have no basis in secular reason, again in air quotes. So to be able to cooperate with them to build the common good, they have to translate these enchanted ways of knowing into secular forms. So it's incumbent on the believer to speak in a way that can be understood and taken as reasonable by secular people. But, and this is an often missed part about Habermas, is that he thinks it is a cooperative endeavour. So secular people must accept the fact that this is a religious person trying to translate their ideas, and that it's probably imperfect and they're not going to be able to do it perfectly, but their intent is to cooperate with me. So that requires a secular person to acknowledge the possible truth content, as his words, of religion, to take it seriously. So it's meant to be this cooperative way of building democracy. And so the people I talk to aren't trying to build democracy, they're trying to get by. They're trying to, even politicians, they're just trying to survive, they're just trying to manage their brand, as I say. So at the heart of his idea is that the public should be a neutral place for people are just talking to each other to come up with good ideas, when in reality, and his is a theory that's like in the ideal case, this is what we should do. Yeah. So it's a bit unfair what I'm about to do, but in reality, the public sphere isn't neutral. Religious people don't just rock up and people accept that they're religious and want to engage with them productively. People judge them. People, they label them, they assume things about them. Not all the time, obviously. We're all here, we all have our ideas. But it's not my point is it's not a neutral place for people to engage and for people just to accept what lies beneath the surface. So his idea is fundamentally flawed from the beginning because there is no such thing as universal tolerance. And he knows that full well. He's kind of spitballing, I think. That's how I read him anyway. What else do you do? If your concern is for liberal democracy, what do you do? Because we can't have an argument on grounds we both accept are the proper grounds to have an argument, because we have completely different outlooks on the world. So how those conversations take place? Well, I think the best model I've ever seen is the business owner I talked about in Southland. That, to me, there isn't much else. He doesn't expect tolerance. He helps to build tolerance among his people toward his religion, and that's imperfect too.
How do you feel like that looks for those listening on the podcast? We know Cam because he was our tutor for our religious studies course, which was on violence and peacemaking. I'm just curious about how you see that interacting with where religion has done wrong, where religion has failed to care for people and or even, committed violence against them. Yeah, how does it look to build a tolerance for your religion in the public space when all people have seen as negative or violent?
Yeah, that's a good question. And this came through in my interviews as well. A lot of people equate Christianity with the past. That's obvious. But a less tolerant past as well, not just the past. A colonial past, a past where people with the same religion, the same coloured skin as we have, destroyed large parts of the world. So when you come to the table as a Christian today, in a lot of people's minds there's this backdrop of what happened not that long ago. We're talking 100, 150 years ago, with Christianity sometimes as a justifier, sometimes as a observer, sometimes as a frontline kind of means to delegitimize other cultures. As I said, when you come to the table today, that is in people's minds, especially when you're at university. People are very aware of our Christian past and loosely the ways that has resulted in intolerance and awful things. So I don't know. I guess is my answer. What are you meant to do with that? I mean, Christian ideas, accurate or inaccurate, have resulted in harm. So how do you form a conversation with that? I don't know. It's hard. Do you just ignore it? Do you agree to move on? I'm not sure. Sorry, I don't have many answers.
You've talked about some stuff which is quite hard to sit with. I mean, I think there is a sitting with, right, as a Christian, what has happened and an acknowledgement of those things. But also the other part that's hard to sit with is the knowing just how hard it is to be authentic in your faith in a public space. It sounds like there's a bit of like pessimism around like the experiences of leaders in the public world who are Christians. And so keen to hear about like where you see hope for them and kind of in the future of Christian leaders in the public space.
I'll start by just describing what they told me about their hope. So one of my chapters is about how they view the direction of New Zealand as a whole, our culture. Where are we heading? And it was universally negative, apart from the business leader. So I'll put him aside for now, because he seems to just be an outlier. But all the principals I talked to, all the politicians, saw New Zealand as heading down a bad road where people are less tolerant towards religion, people are less kind to one another, and some even went as far as to say that by kind of our rejection of Christianity, we are undermining liberal democracy itself. They reasoned values such as tolerance, equality, the concept of the South, one argued. These date back to 2022 years ago, when Jesus died on the cross, right? That's their argument, and we've spent the last 2,000 years going on a roller coaster of embedding these in our governing systems, and this is what we've come up with. And by rejecting Christianity, they say that's all gone. So O'Connor, who I've said is probably the most conservative out of all of them, energetically claimed that the end is nigh, basically. Borderline conspiratorial, I shouldn't say that.
It's okay.
Kind of bombastic, but also he believed it, and he said society is ripping itself apart. It has happened before and it will happen again. Those are his exact words. And in that, he thinks the church will, he's a Catholic, his church will continue on. Bridges had a very similar view, less destructive, but more that we're corroding what makes democracy possible. He's a little bit less profound, I guess, a little bit less exaggerated. Principals just feel that their hands are tied, that the secular state is starting to impose curriculum needs upon them that they disagree with on their faith, based on their faith, and that they can't do anything about it. So they feel like they're stuck, and a third of the principals I talked to said they're planning on retiring because of it. So that's not hopeful. These are not hopeful messages. So post-Christian doom is the general theme of these discussions, and they wanted to tell me that. I didn't ask them that. That's not my intent of talking to them. My intent was to understand how they navigate the secular. I didn't ask them, where are we going, So that was something they felt pressed to let me know, or they wanted to draw that out of me too, a lot of them, because they saw me as, I must agree with them because I'm a Christian too. So where is hope in that? But there's not a lot of hope in that, because I'm not saying that what they're saying is true by any means, I don't believe it, but the idea that they believe it is quite scary, because some of these people they're only one step away from being in government, and I'm not saying they're going to use their religion to dictate to anyone, but they have influence, and they have stature, and if people of that ilk are thinking those things, then is it common? Do Christians think these things? Maybe a step away from liberal democracy for a bit. Are we heading to a pessimistic place where Christian voices are kind of slandered or treated poorly? Like we've talked already about how it's difficult to engage with people and be taken seriously as a Christian, but is it going to get to the point where you're pilloried, you're treated actually negatively because of your beliefs, not just kind of hovered around? I don't know. I don't think so. I think that's an incredibly nihilistic way to look at the world. So how do I look at things? I guess that was part of your question too, wasn't it?
Yeah, what brings you hope?
What brings me hope? I'll do the typical academic thing and define what I think by hope.
This has never happened on our podcast before. I've always wanted this to happen.
Oh, really?
No one's ever defined... We ask everyone this question.
Oh, really?
No one's ever defined what hope actually is.
I'll give it a go.
Thank you.
I'm not saying... I'm not going to cite anyone or anything like that, but... or reference anyone. Hope to me is something that you do after you've done all you can. So you've exhausted all opportunities available to you, and after that you have the luxury to hope. So I find it difficult to be hopeful, or strange, to be hopeful from afar, to look at the Ukraine war and go, oh, well, I hope the Ukrainians win. That to me is very strange because I've not done anything to help the Ukrainians win. I just kind of, it's like a little game over there in Eastern Europe. That is not what I think is hope. I think hope would be me putting my energy and effort into them winning, even from afar, like donating or whatever, and not fighting necessarily, but reorientating myself towards that end that I want, acting towards it, and then when I can't act anymore, I'm hoping that the outcome that I desire happens. So, hope for the future, for us generally as Christians, what does it mean? For me, it means that we have to define what we want, do all we can to bring about what we want, and then after that, worry about if it's going to happen or not. That's the hope part. It's out there once we've acted. I'm a complete hypocrite because I haven't done anything. Probably because...
Other than a thesis.
Well, yeah, that's not directed towards this end though, right? A thesis is a very strange thing. It's almost self-indulgent. So I don't view that as action towards an end I want. Maybe a distraction from the things I want or the things that are right. Yeah, so I guess the period I'm at now is in defining what I want or what a greater we want, because we's more powerful than me. And that's not, as I think about it, that's not a country where we've evangelised and we've found success and everyone's jumping up and down and happy. To me, it's a intentional, small, mobile community that live together and practice the word regardless of what the political situation is. To me, it's completely irrelevant whether we're a successful democracy that's run by Christian values or not. To me, we should, in my opinion, it's completely irrelevant. But to me, that's not what Christianity is for. It's not about being in this privileged position of having the past be deeply Christian, elongating that for as long as possible by weakening our own beliefs. For me, it's about stepping back and redistilling what those beliefs are and how they belong in the 21st century world. I don't know what it is beyond that. Did that make any sense?
That was epic. So you're a Christian.
Yes.
Can you tell us a bit about that, like how that's formed and what that looks like now?
Yeah, sure thing. I'd say the key formative factor is my dad was a pastor in Gore, in Tauranga, and in Australia. So we moved around a little bit for those and other reasons, which was another formative factor. I'd say that's the second. Being a pastor's son in a small rural community, in a wacky Australian community, and in my home, Tauranga. So what does that mean for me? I guess it means that I've developed my faith in conversation with my parents, my siblings. I've got 3 sisters. People often come to my house and comment on the fact that we non-stop talk deeply because that's just the way we communicate. I remember the first time my girlfriend came around, she was shocked because she's not used to such deep conversations at the dinner table. So yeah, that's been very formative for me, these conversations. And my dad's a very intellectual Christian, so he's not as many books as in this room here, but almost. He's well read and he engages with you, and his job is to ask questions now. He's a coach, so he draws things out of you, and that's been great. And my mum is a very heartfelt Christian, and she comes from a long line of wonderful Christian people. My granddad, chief among them, who's the best man I've ever met in my life. He's just so humble and just has such a simple, beautiful view of the world. And that comes through my mother. Yeah, those two things, the intellectual side and that side, are very important to me. So we'll see what happens there. Hopefully my grandson says the same thing about me.
Can I just ask what church it is that you're...
Oh, sure. Yeah, so my dad was a pastor of various Baptist church, like I said.
And also what community you lived in Australia?
Yeah, community in Australia, I said wacky before. That's only because Australia's a very strange place if you're from New Zealand. No offence, Rayne. No, it was just a satellite town just out of Melbourne. A little town called Melton, 12,000 people. And I was very young, I was probably 12, 13. Didn't have many friends or anything like that. We were only there for a year and a half before we moved to the Sunshine Coast.
Hard age to be somewhere for only a year and a half.
Yeah. And I guess that's where I found my interest in religious studies too, because after I left that town, I went to a town nearby called Caroline Springs, closer to the city, and I went to school there, and suddenly I found that all my friends were Muslim. It was very strange. I'd never met a Muslim before. I was only 12, like I said. And all of a sudden, all my friends were first-generation immigrants from Syria, from Lebanon, from Turkey, Pakistan, Iran, all sorts. And I spent many weekends in their houses learning from them and talking with their parents. And I definitely didn't know it at the time, but I learnt a lot from that, and I gained a lot of interest for the differences and similarities between us. I remember one moment, it's kind of etched into my brain. My friend's mum got out of the car when she was dropping us home to say hi to my mum, and my dad came outside and tried to shake her hand, and we didn't know better, and she refused, and Dad was deeply offended, and I was very confused because I didn't know what that meant, and I didn't know why it would be offensive to either of them. But that is kind of a formative moment in my thinking about kind of diversity and the ways that different groups kind of come together in those moments.
And then kind of since then you became an adult and you still choose your faith, you still choose to kind of identify as a Christian. Why?
Why? Well, I guess I've never thought why. Well, it's not like I'm very intentional about it. I don't just float through and have a label because I think that's a nice thing to have. I read and I try and kind of try, emphasis on that word try, to live my life via what I think the Bible's telling me and what I experience from external kind of conversations. But why? Well, probably at the heart of it, I've not found a more holistic answer. Listen, and that's not because I haven't tried. Like, I tried to read Nietzsche for a year and I didn't find any answers in him that were deeper or more explanatory. I guess that's it. Yeah, I just have never seen a better argument, which is a very awful way to describe Christianity, but it's also true.
I feel like I relate to that as well. Also, I think there's something to be said of being within a tradition simply because you were gifted that tradition as a young person and from your family and from your parents. Like that's a really important reason, I think.
I do think it's a beautiful way to make sense of the world.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. I think I was saying to someone this recently, like when someone that you love passes, you begin to realise the importance of carrying them with you in your life. And I think it's the same with tradition. And it's that, like, for ages I've just been so confused by why the church, at my church we have this little bell. Like, it's not even a bell, I don't know what it is, it's like a wee gong. And the first time I went and they ring it during communion, and I remember just being like, what the fuck? Like, why is
weird as hell.
Why is that there? But I think it actually was for just the woman who rung it, loved ringing it, and now she's passed away. And I think, like, that's why we have some of the weird shit that we see, like, in the church space, I think, is because it's an honouring of, like, who's gone before us. And then kind of as I've begun to engage with, like, the Māori world as well, I begin to realise, like, oh, there's something really important about ancestry, and there's something really important about, like, those who have gone before and passed things on, and let us, like, rather than be like, nah, away with that because we're in today, like, let us actually honour that and those who have left us.
Yeah, that's a wonderful way of describing that. I've always had a problem, not a problem, it's a better way to put it. I've always struggled with tradition and the authority that tradition has within traditional communities over now, over the present. I've always struggled with that. And I think it's my inherent struggle with any authority whatsoever that
so good
that I've struggled with that. But like Dad, for example, has been asking me to get baptised for many years, and I've only really started considering it now, even though I'm a grown-up Baptist. And that's got nothing to do with my faith. It's only got something to do with me thinking that ritual has no bearing on what I am, which it does. It does, but I've struggled to put those dots together in a way that's not just me relinquishing my control, I guess.
I usually feel like instead of rituals having authority over us, once I create a sense of familiarity and ownership over that space, then it becomes an extension of who I am. Like, I feel like baptism is kind of the same way. Like, it's not here to prove to everyone else that I do it because I have to, or because I've proved to other people that I am a real Christian or something, but because it's an expression of what is already true within me. And
that's exactly what it is.
It's a much sweeter way of looking at it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's similar, but it's just a way to physically embody what is already true.
That's right.
Yeah. What is your most controversial opinion? If you were in a room with other people from your field, other master's students, probably in religious studies, what is something that you would most likely disagree with them about?
Apart from everything, what would I mostly disagree with them about? I don't want to get overly critical, but I have a tendency to view academia with not the warmest of views, as you can probably tell through the way I speak. I think that, not within my lovely department, but many academics have an overinflated sense of self-importance or of authority because they exercise their intelligence in a certain way. So that would probably be my biggest disagreements with people in my immediate vicinity, is that I don't think academia is the best way, or even the second best way, to exercise learning or to find a way to articulate yourself or to gain knowledge. And the reasons for that are very complex and I won't go into them, but that would probably get me in a lot of hot water with people that I've been studying under for many years. But I would say it to them just as I said it to you. And I'm aware of how much good the university has done me. I'm not discarding all the very good people that I engage with, like Philip and Jeff, at all. It's not a personal thing. It's a cultural thing, as an academic cultural thing. Yeah, and I stay well clear of academia normally.
Except for the fact that you are pretty deeply immersed into it.
Yeah, well,
work and study within.
I love that he's like everything.
Yeah,
that's a great answer.
That's funny.
My experience in the last 2 years in religious studies is completely devoid of any interaction with any religious studies people, because I've been part-time, so I don't get an office. My friends who I studied with up until masters, they either studied from home all the time or they've gone elsewhere. So I'm kind of on the peripheries. I don't really, like when you see master students in the movies, they're in like a dark room with, like a low lit room with rich wood and heaps of books, and in reality I'm at home in my bedroom looking at the screen. So that's a bit of a shame, to be honest. So I don't really get the chance to have these arguments that kind of characterise academia and why it is so enticing and fun, which is a bit of a shame. Blame COVID for that, just like everything else.
But you get to hang out with cool students like us at religious studies.
Yeah, that's great.
What books have been influential and transformational for you throughout your life as well, that you would recommend to us or to young people?
So informative books and books I'm reading at the moment, because I'm kind of in a perpetual state of just reading and rereading in the background books that are informative in my life. So I just I add one to the list. It's quite a short list, but then I just, in the background, I read them along throughout the year, whilst also reading in between to read new books. About 3 years ago, I just fell absolutely in love with fiction. It was kind of like a foreign thing for me during my undergrad, and then all of a sudden I was like, wow. I got into it through Chekhov, which is kind of random, but his short stories are beautiful. And then I developed over time, I developed a love of authors like Hemingway and Joyce and Proust and Kafka, and their fiction, up until about Nabokov. I don't know how to say these people's names. But I read and listen. I do a lot of listening of books because I don't read well, and I don't develop pictures in my mind of how stories, of scenes or anything. I can't do that. So voices and rhythm are really important to me. But books that are important to me in my life, number one is the Bible.
That's a good answer. A good Christian answer.
Number two.
Right answer!
That's one of those ones that continues in the background. Number two is Ulysses by James Joyce, which is the most remarkable text by a human being I've ever read in my life. It's incredible. It's a kind of heroization of man in the ordinary, or human beings in the ordinary. So Ulysses was a character in the Odyssey or the Iliad, I can't remember, I should know that. And Joyce is and so that's a big epic poem, big epic book. And Joyce is taking the concept of Ulysses the hero and inserting him in 1905 Dublin. And so he's making him a hero. So all the book it's very long, it's about, 800 pages long, maybe more, is one day in his life, Leopold Bloom, and other characters too, like Stephen Douglas and things like this. And the language is very experimental, the style is new, and nobody's been able to recreate it in the last 100 years, exactly almost, since it was published. And it's very impressive, very hard to follow, very beautiful. For my birthday a couple of weeks ago, my mum got me an illustrated version, and it's just beautiful.
Rayne wants to.
I have so far, side note, read every book recommended to me on this podcast.
Really?
Yeah, so far. Or like, I'm still in the process of reading it, but most of them. And so I mean, I'm gonna have to find it eventually.
Yeah.
That's the deal.
A couple of weeks ago, I was in the library as I do, and I saw a sign and it said James Joyce. I was like, oh, I like James Joyce, and I just followed the sign. It was pointing downstairs, and went down 3 flights of stairs, and there's another sign, and then I peek into this room, and there's like 40 people in this room, and there's Kate Bush on the TV singing a song about James Joyce, singing one of his famous monologues from the end of the book. And I was, what is this? So I come in and I just kind of stand in the background, and she's reading the book or singing the book, and then they all cheer when it ends, and then the guy reads the famous opening. So that was the end. He reads the famous opening, and then the Irish attaché from Dublin to New Zealand starts just speaking, and he's talking about Joyce. And I realised, I knew Bloomsday was a thing, but I realised that every year on June 6th, I have to get that date right, and I don't think that's right, they celebrate the day where the book was set. And this was the 100th centenary of it being published in 1922, and celebrating at Vic. So there's all these people there. No one my age, they were mostly like professors and things. And so I realised that, and there were all these bits of information on the wall. Then they started to do a quiz, and I was like, I was reading it at the moment, like I was halfway through it, and I was like, I'm gonna enter this quiz, don't know who anyone is. Win the quiz.
Congrats.
That was a great moment of my life. I won the quiz, got a free book and a t-shirt, and then walked home happy as. I was so stoked. So now I have, and then so I got home and I had 5 copies of the book now. Yeah, which is just ridiculous, and I don't need them, so have one. 2 of them are illustrated. One of them's the 1922 text. Another one's the 100th year centenary text, and then another one's just some random copy that I got secondhand. But yeah, so that book's very informative in my life. I could go on, as you can tell, I can go on and on about it. Other authors that matter to me a lot, Ernest Hemingway. I didn't know this. I kind of got into him relatively organically. No one told me to read him or said I should read him. I had an app on my phone that has Audible free short stories. That was like once a week at that time, and then they had one by him. It's called A Kid in the Rain, that story. And I thought, I quite like this. And so I got really into him after that. In his book, A Farewell to Arms, it's very important. And that's kind of just a love story set in World War I in Italy. The main character falls in love with a British nurse. It sounds very typical now. And then it's just like the journey that they're on in love. And it's tragic and it's beautiful. It's Hemingway at his best, and I just absolutely love it. At the moment, I'm reading the books Hemingway tried to write to recreate that brilliance. So his later works, and his style is still there. It's kind of like blunt, unapologetic but poetic sentences. They're still there, but they're just not quite the same. It's just, they don't quite live up to it for me. So the one I'm reading at the moment is called Across the River and Into the Trees. And so that's a love story again between an American army officer, there's a theme here, and an Italian beautiful woman who's half his age. And it's good, but it's not as good.
I don't read fiction. I don't like it.
You don't like fiction?
I find it so boring and dull.
What?
I do feel like a lot of your books that you've talked about, even though they're fiction, sound really intelligent and interesting, and I'm excited to read them.
They're like nice fiction, not like, I mean, my fiction is like Harry Potter. I'm like all about the Harry Potter series. Yeah. And so your stuff is much more classic.
Good fiction is like a good song, and that like you listen to music and it tells you a lot, and it makes you feel a lot. Doesn't always matter what the words are per se, but it matters what you feel as a result of it. And for me, that's what fiction is. It has a way of kind of uncovering something about a human spirit without... The best books, in my mind, don't tell you what that lesson is. You come to it by yourself.
I have to work for it.
By just through beautiful language. And it's the same thing with poetry. A good book is basically, for me, is just
A poem.
long poem.
You've mentioned that you like poetry. Do you have favourite poets that you go back to as well?
I enjoy poetry, but I like listening to it better than reading it because for some reason I just suck at reading it and I find it really difficult. But my favourite poet is William Wordsworth. Is probably my favourite poet for no other reason than his poem Tintin Abbey, and it's a very long title. It's like 2 sentences long, the title, which is strange. Which is about memory and kind of wrestling with memory. I read it as kind of a stage in my life where that subject was really attractive to me, and I guess it stuck.
Do you have a favourite app on your phone?
Yeah, I do actually. The more I talk, the more I sound like you can put me in like a little weird academic nerd box.
Yeah, it's quite sweet, yeah.
It's so wholesome. Like this kind of like romantic,
yeah, it's the kind of person
pretentious, but not you.
the kind of person I wish that I was.
Yeah.
Like, I met with a friend of mine outside a museum recently in Dunedin, and she was standing by a tree reading a book, and I was like, oh my gosh, that has always been my dream, to be that guy who likes reading that much, that like I get to the museum and I pull out my book and I'm like reading it under a tree, but I'm not. But that's the kind of person you sound like.
Anyway, continue.
Yeah, but I'd have headphones in so no one would know. I'd be secretly on that. My favourite app it's called Wiki Art, and it's just thousands and thousands and thousands of like paintings from Mesopotamia onwards, so forever. And every day they just have like a featured section, and scrolling through that, it's like that's the best app I've got because it's just very beautiful.
You do this every day?
Wow.
Every day that I'm not, probably not recently because I've been in such a cloud.
Kind of, flurry.
Yeah, but when I have a clear mind, absolutely, yeah.
So it's really interesting you talk about the kind of well thought through intelligence of your father. It seems to be very reflected in you. Like you also have that same kind of well thought through, deep, wanting to engage with these big things. It's really awesome to see.
I agree.
Thank you so much for coming.